This happened several summers ago when I was still residing in my childhood home with my parents. I was 17 at the time. One particular weekend, my parents went away for a few days without me, which was virtually unheard of for them. They are the kind of people who are almost always at home, constantly maintaining order, and rarely taking time away for themselves. Throughout all the years I lived there, I couldn't recall a single instance they had ever gone away together like that. Naturally, I decided to seize the rare opportunity and invited MJ, my girlfriend then, over to spend the weekend. It felt like a once-in-a-lifetime chance to have the house completely to myself and without any interruptions. MJ had this playful, mischievous side that made every moment feel more exciting than it perhaps should have. Admittedly, that was one of the reasons why we ultimately didn't work out. But I'm not going to delve into that right now. Knowing her personality, I probably should have foreseen what unfolded that night. The moment she caught sight of my heated pool glowing in the backyard, her eyes sparkled with a hint of mischief. She suggested we skinny dip, grinning as if it were the most obvious idea ever. I mentioned my neighbors might see, but she persisted and made a very valid point that we might likely never get the chance again. We had swum together many times before, but never done anything quite so daring. At least, not from my perspective. I had always been the well-behaved, polite kid growing up. Even now, I sometimes catch myself scolding for being too nice. Anyway, it took quite a bit of persuasion for me to agree, but MJ had a certain charm about her. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and soon enough, we were in the pool laughing and splashing beneath the night sky. It was actually a rather romantic moment, as cheesy as that might sound. The water felt warm against the cool summer air, and everything seemed perfect, almost dreamlike. Let me quickly describe the house's layout. The pool was situated right outside the large bay windows that overlooked the living room. Because it was so dark outside and the indoor lights were still on, we had a clear view into the house. It was like looking into a lit-up dollhouse. I apologize if that's unclear, but if you could see a picture, you'd understand the imagery. For a while, that view made me feel secure, as if we were still connected to the house while floating outside in our own little bubble. That sense of comfort didn't last long, though. At one point, while MJ was talking about something, I don't even remember what, I glanced up at the windows and froze. I saw the last thing I expected. On one of the far living room walls was a shadow. It was faint, yet distinct, and I knew it was definitely a shadow due to the way it was moving. I watched in horror as it moved out of sight, as if someone was walking deeper into the house. My heart started pounding. I felt a surge of panic, but I didn't want to frighten MJ. I whispered to her that we needed to get out of the pool. She didn't question me. She simply followed my lead as I tried to get out of the pool and dry off as quietly as possible. I told MJ to hide in the pool house, turn off the light, and remain completely silent until I returned. Her playful attitude was completely gone. I could tell she was freaking out, but she was doing a really good job of keeping it together. She nodded and slipped into the pool house without another word. I opened the back door as quietly as I could and stepped into the kitchen. I intended to handle the situation myself. That's simply how my parents had raised me. I grabbed a knife from one of the cutting boards and began moving through the house. Someone had definitely been inside. That much was obvious. I started noticing small, subtle signs that didn't make sense. A chair in the dining room was slightly pulled out, as if someone had been sitting there. A picture frame on the wall was askew. A coffee mug I didn't remember using was sitting on the counter. Things like that. Things no rational robber would ever waste time doing. As I moved through the house, I started to consider the possibility that it wasn't a robber I was looking for. My heart rate must have been through the roof at that point. I thought I was going to be tackled every few seconds, but nothing ever happened. I checked every room on the ground floor but didn't find anyone. All the doors were locked and all the windows were shut tight. It didn't make any sense. If someone had been inside, where were they now? The more I wandered around the house, the more my bravado faded. At one point, I simply got fed up and decided to call the police. They arrived quickly and conducted a thorough search of the house and yard, but they didn't find anything either. No signs of forced entry, no footprints in the backyard, nothing. They couldn't even suggest a plausible method of entry. One of the officers suggested I might have scared off whoever it was, but I wasn't convinced. At a certain point, it was too late at night to do much else. The police left. MJ and I were too scared to stay in the house, but we had no other option. We locked every door, barricaded the bedroom, and tried to get some sleep. Around 4 a.m., I woke up to the sound of creaking floorboards above me. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but the noise was far too obvious. Someone was moving upstairs. I listened for a while longer and started hearing footsteps moving down the stairs, as if whoever it was attempting to make their way outside. Adrenaline surged through me as I grabbed the knife I'd left on the nightstand. I told MJ to stay put and bolted out of the room. I moved as quickly and quietly as I could, but by the time I reached the front door, it was wide open. Whoever had been inside was gone. I didn't even bother calling the police again. There was nothing they could do anyway. I just made sure all the doors were locked and went back to bed. The next morning, the full scale of the intrusion hit me. All of our kitchen knives were missing. All of them, which was definitely not something a rational person would do. They'd also taken smaller items, some cash, a few watches, random electronics. But it was the knives that haunted me. It felt like whoever had been inside had left a message, although I couldn't figure out what it was. When my parents came home and I told them what happened, they were surprisingly understanding. I'm not one to scare easily, never have been. So this experience honestly didn't affect me much. But even now, I still sometimes acknowledge how strange it all was. I was never able to figure out how that person had gotten inside or where they had been hiding while the police searched the house. This is always going to be one of those odd things that just sticks with a person forever. Story 2. This happened last year during Hollywood Bash weekend. I attend Rowan University, and for anyone unfamiliar, Holly Bash is Rowan's big spring festival. It's kind of like our own mini Coachella. It takes place every April on Hollybush Green, right near the historic Hollybush Mansion. There are carnival rides, food trucks, lawn games, and a concert featuring a surprise headliner. The whole campus shows up. It's supposed to be the most fun day of the year. I was a sophomore at the time, and like many other students, I stayed out late that night. Rowan is in a pretty quiet suburban neighborhood. Glassboro doesn't really feel dangerous, even at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's likely why I didn't think much of it when I left my friend's dorm and started walking back to Chestnut Hall alone. What I didn't realize was that earlier that night, around 12:30 a.m., a group of masked individuals, perhaps 10 or more, had been seen banging on doors and riding bikes around campus, including outside Chestnut. I personally never witnessed this firsthand, but apparently it was alarming enough that people were posting about it online while it was happening. I hadn't checked any of that information. I was simply trying to get back to my dorm. So it was about 2:30 a.m. I swiped into Chestnut Hall, went inside, and was walking towards the stairs when I noticed someone sitting in the lounge. On its own, that wasn't weird. It's a college dorm. People are up all the time. But the guy was wearing a mask. Not a costume mask, but a full-on black ski mask. And he wasn't doing anything, just sitting there completely silent. It took me a second to process. I actually paused near the entrance of the lounge, somewhat frozen. It didn't make sense. I had no idea why he was there or why he was masked, but it genuinely freaked me out. And then he jumped off the couch and turned towards me in one quick motion. I didn't even think. I ran down the hall and ducked into the nearest bathroom, locking the door behind me. I must have stayed in there for at least 5 minutes, long enough to hear the hallway go completely silent again. I didn't want to seem paranoid, but my gut was screaming at me. Eventually, I cracked the door open and peeked out. No one was in the hall. I thought maybe he had left. I stepped out. I didn't want to sprint and freak myself out even more, so I just walked toward the other exit. That's when I saw him again. He was still in the lounge, still masked, and this time he was directly across from where I had to walk. His bike was leaned against the door, and there was a chair wedged between the wall and the frame, clearly jammed there on purpose. I had pepper spray on my keychain. I pulled it out and held it in front of me. I didn't aim or threaten him, I just showed that I had it, hoping that would be enough. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I walked past him. He didn't try to stop me. He didn't even flinch. It was like he wanted me to see him, like the fear itself was the whole point. I didn't look back. I pushed the other door open and left the building. I was halfway to Magnolia when I heard the sound of bikes behind me. 3 more masked individuals rode up next to me. They didn't touch me or try to grab me, but they were heckling me, laughing, saying things I couldn't make out. I know that sounds fairly harmless on its own, but a few of them were waving what looked like guns, which was the part that freaked me out the most. I suppose they could have been fake or airsoft guns, but it was clear they were trying to intimidate me. I tried to ignore them, but I could feel how close they were riding, just barely out of arm's reach. I made it to Magnolia and texted my friend to come meet me outside. He walked me back to Chestnut, and that made me feel a lot safer. Fortunately, the bikers were gone by then. I didn't call the police that night. I wasn't hurt, but I was really scared. I can't even fully explain why. It wasn't until the next morning that I told my mom everything. She ended up reporting it, and later that night, some of my guy friends texted me that they had also been approached by a group of masked individuals, and a few of them had pulled guns. Nobody was hurt, but it was enough that campus police started taking it seriously. I've heard lots of rumors about who those individuals were. Some people think it was just a group of local kids trying to scare people. It's just the gun detail that freaks me out. It's likely that a group of armed non-students had somehow made their way into my dorm that night, the place I live. I've been scared to walk home alone ever since. Story 3. This story happened 2 summers ago, back when I was still dating Amanda. I've kept it to myself for a while, not because it's embarrassing or anything, but because I didn't want to risk unintentionally revealing information about her or her family. Now that we've been broken up for over a year, I think it's safe to talk about it. At that time, Amanda was working as a camp counselor for a summer program in the city. It wasn't exactly close to home, about a 25-minute drive from her quiet, affluent suburban neighborhood. But she loved the job for reasons I still don't fully understand. I always thought it was a little beneath her, especially considering her life aspirations. But I wasn't going to be insensitive and outright say that. Her house was exactly what you'd picture for a family in that kind of area. Big yard, 3 stories, high ceilings, and enough space to host just about any event. That's why when the camp counselors were deciding where to host their end-of-summer party, Amanda's house was the obvious choice. I'm probably making it sound like that was the first time she hosted camp-related parties, but that's not really the case. It just so happened that it was my first time experiencing one, since I hadn't been dating her the previous summer. Her parents were out of town that weekend. They were always out of town, really. I don't want to get too deep into it out of respect, but Amanda's family dynamic was unusual. Her relationship with her parents more closely resembled that of 3 colleagues rather than 3 family members. Everything was very transactional, and it was blatantly obvious to any observer that all 3 of them were versions of the same narcissistic, insecure person, even though they despise being compared to each other. That description is honestly a little harsh. Her dad was pretty laid back, and I honestly missed the guy, but, feelings. Anyway, the party was packed. Dozens of people crowded into the house and spilled out into the backyard. The atmosphere was lively and fun, and most of the guests were friendly and easygoing. Well, except for one guy, Pete. From the moment he showed up, I had a bad feeling about him. He was loud, overly confident, and spent way too much time talking to Amanda. It wasn't just small talk either. It was full-on flirting. He wasn't even trying to hide it. I felt disrespected, but I didn't want to make a scene. Amanda and I had been dating for a while, and while I trusted her most of the time, she had a bad habit of being a little too friendly with other guys. It was a sore spot in our relationship, and I knew bringing it up would only cause problems. I didn't want to come across as insecure, so instead of confronting Pete directly, I devised a different strategy. I started acting overly friendly towards him. Every time he finished a drink, I offered him another. We chatted, laughed, and before long, Pete was drinking faster than he probably should have been. I don't exactly have the build of a heavy drinker, but the Irish and Mexican in my blood means my alcohol tolerance is always going to be absurdly high. My plan was to get him so drunk that he either made a fool of himself and the problem resolved itself, or he fell asleep and the problem resolved itself. It was a win-win situation. I was somewhat surprised to find that my plan actually worked, and sooner than I expected too. By midnight, he was passed out on the basement couches, drooling into a pillow. I was smug about it, but Amanda saw right through me. She accused me of doing it on purpose, which I denied. After some tense back and forth, I finally admitted that I might have played a small part in it. We argued a little, but it wasn't anything serious, just another disagreement to add to the pile. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that my petty stunt had put a damper on the night. As the party wore on, the house got louder, messier, and more chaotic. I needed a break, so I stepped outside to get some air. The driveway was cool and quiet, a nice contrast to the noise inside. I was leaning against Amanda's car, just staring up at the stars, when I noticed someone standing at the far edge of the property. The figure was motionless, just standing there in the dim glow of one of the street lamps. I squinted, trying to make out who it was. When they didn't move, I decided to approach them. It was probably the liquid confidence that made me do it. I don't think I would have done it otherwise. I asked, "Hey, can I help you?" Trying to sound friendly, but a little assertive. The figure took a few slow steps towards me before stopping. It was definitely a man. That much I could tell, but I couldn't make out any notable features since it was so dark. He didn't answer my question. Instead, he asked, "Are your parents home?" The question threw me off. It wasn't just what he asked, it was how he said it, like he already knew the answer. Before I could respond, he repeated his question. This time, he name-dropped Amanda's parents. He knew who they were. That was enough to turn the unease I'd been feeling into full-blown suspicion. I lied and told the guy my parents were inside, even though part of me thought he knew I didn't live there and that I was lying. Still, I thought maybe I could deter him from doing whatever he was going to do. The guy nodded and simply said, "Okay," before turning and walking away. I expected him to head to a car or another house, but he didn't. Instead, he walked straight down the street, disappearing into the darkness. I watched him for as long as I could, but it was too dark to tell where he went. Something about it didn't sit right with me, but I tried to brush it off. I went back inside and ended up in the basement playing ping pong with a few other people. Amanda had a pool table upstairs, so most of the crowd was up there, leaving the basement quieter. I didn't feel like being my usual fun, social self, so I preferred the quieter atmosphere where I could actually hear people talking. At some point, I heard the doorbell ring. At first, I didn't think much of it. This was a party after all, so people coming and going wasn't anything out of the ordinary. But something in my subconscious was tugging at my brain, like there was something I was missing. As I stood there mindlessly slapping a ping pong ball around, I realized what it was. Amanda had instructed everyone to come through the back door, which didn't even have a doorbell. That meant someone had come up to the front door, which wasn't supposed to happen. I excused myself from the game and headed upstairs, knowing I was probably overreacting, but wanting an answer. As I walked past Amanda's room, I noticed she was passed out on her bed, completely oblivious to the chaos around her. That's when it hit me. I was probably the only somewhat sober person left in the house. I turned her bedroom light off and gently shut her door, trying not to disturb her. When I got to the front door, a girl named Bella was standing there. I asked if she knew who had rung the doorbell. She was belligerently drunk, so getting a coherent response out of her was about as easy as getting one from a squirrel. That girl was also pretty brain dead, which didn't help matters. Eventually, she said that there was some old guy at the door who claimed to be a family friend and needed to return something he borrowed. In response, I yelled, "You let him in?" She shrugged her shoulders and walked away, presumably to go on to the next random guy she would be bringing home that night. I ran upstairs to Amanda's parents' room, and my worst fears were confirmed. Drawers were pulled open, jewelry boxes were empty, and the closet looked like it had been ransacked. That guy had robbed them. I figured he was already gone. I mean, the jewelry boxes were empty, the drawers were ransacked. It looked like he had taken what he had come for. I was about to head back downstairs when I noticed something move in the mirror on the back of the door. It was just a quick shift, like someone ducking out of view behind me. I turned around, but I wasn't fast enough. The guy tackled me before I even saw his face. He knocked the wind out of me as the two of us hit the ground, and I couldn't breathe. The guy started clawing at my shirt like he was trying to rip it off. With all the strength I had, I managed to push him off, but it was more panic than strength. He got up and sprinted straight across the room, dove out one of the open windows, and landed on the roof with a thud. I ran to the window just in time to see him drop into the side yard and take off running. I didn't chase him. I wouldn't have been able to catch him anyway. I just stood there trying to process what had happened and catch my breath. The damage was done. He was gone. But the encounter took its toll. I didn't want to stay up any longer chaperoning everyone. I didn't want to be the guy to kick everyone out either, though. So I actually called the police and told them to help me kick everyone out. Most of the local officers knew Amanda's family, so it wasn't like they were going to arrest anyone or do anything drastic. The cops came and kicked everyone out, and I secretly thanked them for their help. After they left, I went downstairs, slapped Pete awake, and told him he had to find some way home. He threw up before calling an Uber. The next morning, Amanda had no choice but to call her parents and tell them what had happened. They were furious, as anyone would be, but Amanda didn't seem to care. She had always been rebellious, brushing off authority like it was beneath her. They didn't even bother calling the police. The house had no cameras, and they figured it would be a waste of time. I'm still not sure how that guy knew Amanda's parents weren't home. Part of me thinks whoever robbed them knew them in some capacity. Looking back, that night revealed more about Amanda than I wanted to admit. Her indifference, her carelessness, it was all a red flag I should have taken more seriously. Hindsight, as they say, is 20/20,